When I was asked to speak today, my initial reaction was really to say no. I wasn't sure that I could come up with a hot topic in business, one that would be of value to you all, one that maybe you didn't learn in business school or graduate school or undergraduate school, one that maybe is an afterthought or that you don't place a lot of value on. And then it hit me. It's the one intangible asset that keeps me up at night, brings me the most pleasure, and that I can credit for a lot of my success. Corporate culture. Whether yours has been thoughtfully crafted or is just an afterthought, whether it's a priority or not, whether it's good or bad, every company has a corporate culture. And so my no became an enthusiastic yes, and here we are today. What I hope to do is share with you, first and foremost, true stories of how I've defined corporate culture, why I believe it's a key step in the success of any business, and the challenges of implementing and maintaining the culture as your company evolved, or more formally entitled, Corporate Culture from the School of Hard Knocks. My 30 years in leadership roles at 4 emerging businesses has taught me the following. Make corporate culture as important as cash flow, revenues, and customers. A strong culture leads to a satisfied and engaged workforce, which is reflected in every single thing they do, from superior customer service to problem solving to creating new initiatives to help differentiate the company from its competitors. And StarTex Power, being in the commodity business, service is our differentiator. In order to provide superior service, I knew we had to create a culture that produces superior staff. Corporate culture for me surrounds around 5 components: an all-for-one, hands-on-deck atmosphere, a willingness to learn from your employees, flexibility, respect, and accessibility. I came up with these 5 components after years of managing successful startups and watching them grow into multi-million-dollar corporations. Yeah, I've seen my fair share of ups and downs, like servers going down without backups. I've seen every personnel issue humanly possible. We had flooding as the result of Hurricane Ike, and almost a year later to the date, we had flooding from broken pipes in our office. Through these experiences, though, I've also seen incredible, heroic acts by employees to help create the success of a company. When things get tough, we sit around customer service with a pint, or maybe a gallon now, of ice cream. It helps us relax, and we try and figure out what to do. All of these experiences, both positive and negative, have really helped me become the type of person that I am today, that places a tremendous value on employee relationships. I didn't realize at the time, but what I was creating at these companies over all these years is what we now call corporate culture. There was no name to it, at least not back then. Whatever success I've enjoyed can be attributed in large part to making corporate culture a priority. The jobs I've had before starting StarTex Power have really helped me develop my strategies for success. I wasn't hatched as COO of a $300 million company. And in fact, as was mentioned earlier, I started my career here, getting a BBA in accounting from the McCombs School. I quickly realized, though, perhaps I wasn't cut out for public accounting. But through my financial experience and background as a CPA, I landed at a startup telecom company, being their controller. On day 1, and this is not an exaggeration, the owner came to me and said, "Congratulations, welcome, we're so happy to have you here. Here's our books and records," and it was a shoebox. I promise you, a basic shoebox. And oh, by the way, our creditors want to foreclose on us because we haven't paid our bills on time. Great, great. After 5 demanding years there, I left a strong and viable company with 100 employees that sold for a hefty profit a few years later. I wasn't sure at the time why I worked so hard or why I took such a personal interest in that company. All I knew was that I loved the challenge of taking the pieces and fitting them together to build a successful company. After that first venture, my next opportunity came when I was recruited to run another small telecom company that had really been struggling for a couple of years and was at that place where either they needed to close or really start to turn a profit. On my first day, after my introduction to the staff, one of our just 5 employees came up to me with a big smile and said, "There is just too much politics here. I'm leaving." All right? It's not to mention, though, that he was in charge of our billing, the only one who knew our billing and critical to our daily existence. 5 years later, we were Houston's fastest growing privately held company, and we sold for a nice return to our investors. Was this just luck? How did we come so far, and what changes had the biggest impact? After negotiating the sale of that telecom company, I was recruited to help launch a retail electricity company in a brand new market. We began in 2001 with 3 employees, 800 square feet of office space, and a plan. We knew we wanted to capture a piece of the newly deregulated electricity market, but we had no idea how to do it. Like any startup, we had our setbacks, including our billing company going bankrupt after 9 months, on a day I fondly refer to as Black Friday. Thank goodness, though, we also had a lot of sunny Mondays, and all during the startup of that company and through the ensuing 3 years, I kept talking to my husband, Bob, also a UT grad, actually an MBA grad from McCombs School, about the 2 of us starting our own electric company and taking advantage of our combined experiences. 3 years later, in November of 2003, I left the electricity company, which had grown to 80 employees and 100,000 customers. But once again, I was challenged with the question, how did we become so successful in such a short time? It became apparent, however, that engaged staff, people who wanted to come to work and who enjoyed what they did, and the people with whom they worked, not only related better to customers, but had a vested interest in the success of our company. It was clear Bob and I had to replicate that type of culture. StarTex Power began in 2004 at our dining room table. Today we have 120 employees, 146,000 customers, and lots of stories to tell of lessons learned. In the beginning, Bob and I talked a lot about what type of a company we wanted to be, and not really just from the financial perspective. What do we want to look and feel like? Entrepreneurs typically start off with a vision of this close family-type atmosphere. Without a specific plan, the family, though, soon starts to fall apart. And once the day-to-day financial and operational challenges kick in, there's little time for anything else. Corporate culture then becomes an afterthought, with no strategic plan, no budget, and no accountability. For us, however, corporate culture is non-negotiable. It is and has always been intentional, measured, and constantly evolving. Always, it's been focused on those 5 elements, which I will repeat often during this conversation and this discussion. An all-for-one, hands-on-deck atmosphere, a willingness to learn from your employees, accessibility, flexibility, and respect, which we know, when implemented successfully, leads to high employee morale, consistent, efficient employee performance, a competitive edge stemming from superior customer service, a staff aligned towards similar goals, and most importantly, the strength to overcome the vicissitudes of a new business. I was determined to include corporate culture as an integral part of producing a business where I would not only be proud of, but one that reflected my core values, and most importantly, one where I and others would enjoy working. Other than one that when people walked into our front door, they sensed a common purpose, a common definition of success, and I believe StarTex Power has accomplished that, as evidenced by the many awards that Jim had alluded to earlier. StarTex's first customer was turned on New Year's Eve 2004. But Bob and I knew, starting on day one, we had to lead by example. We had to set the example of a strong corporate culture. The way we dealt with one another, with our customers and with our investors, was going to set the example of how everybody related to each other and the customers. Yes, employees may have the ability to answer the phone, there's no doubt about that, but it's the tone, compassion, and sense of urgency that we felt characterized a great customer service organization. And you'll see the remaining slides are really just examples of a lot of the corporate culture that we put in place, visuals, so you can see what it looks like. So enjoy it while I continue my conversation. And you can laugh if you see some funny things, don't worry. Early in 2005, with Bob and myself, the other 2 employees, we all ensured that the phones were answered, even if our one customer service rep was busy. After 4 rings, the service phones rolled over to our desks. And that's where the buck stopped. Nothing was and remains today more important to us than the customer. Let me give you an example. It was early on. Bob was sitting at his desk, eating lunch, and keep in mind, Bob is a financial whiz, but not so much at operations or day-to-day. The phone rang, it rolled over to his phone, he picked it up, the woman wanted to make a payment. Fairly simple. They engaged in a conversation, and after Bob asking her the same information over and over again, she politely said to him, "You don't do this for a living, do you?" Well, that led to a great discussion on why Bob was answering the phones and all about StarTex Power. It turned out that the woman had been an executive secretary and she had to leave and quit her job to battle cancer. She was feeling better, although not fully full of energy that she could go back full time, but she was really getting bored at home. After a lengthy discussion on how each of them viewed customer service, Bob offered this woman a job with flexibility commensurate with her energy level. As of today, she remains one of our top performers, working when she can. Another example is when I took a phone call. And again, it was somebody making a payment, which is a good thing. But I realized very quickly that this was a very good friend of mine. Well, not wanting to appear that we were such a small, rinky-dink organization, I tried to disguise my voice. Well, that didn't work very well, and within about 2 seconds, she said, "Marcie, is that you?" Oh. Yep, sure was. Chairman and COO of StarTex Power, answering the phones and taking payments. If she could only see how well I made coffee and watered the plants. We also encourage an all-for-one, hands-on-deck atmosphere by getting the employees to have a vested interest in the company's success. If an employee has ownership, they're typically more enthusiastic and try harder. 2 key steps to achieving company success. Both Bob and I have worked for companies that were sold and only a few of the key executives reaped the benefits. We were adamant not to replicate that type of a culture. What we did was twofold. Not only does each StarTex Power employee, after 6 months of service, receive 1,000 stock options, but we also have a profit-sharing plan that has distributed bonuses to every employee since day one and has also been growing ever since day one. We also have signs, as you can see, around the office showing our next big customer target and our current customer levels for everybody to see and strive for. Additionally, once a person has been at StarTex Power for 6 months, they get a star about this big, and we ask them to decorate it with their individual personality showing. All of our stars are hung on one giant wall for everyone to see that while we are all individuals, we work as one team to be successful. And that's what I mean by an all-for-one, hands-on-deck atmosphere. I often get asked whether all of this is really worth it, or is it just better to pay people more money? And I tell this story about one of the telecom companies that I've previously alluded to. We had a great company, a great culture. It was very much a hands-on deck, all-for-one atmosphere. We celebrated every type of success. Sales would answer customer service phones, allowing customer service to take the afternoon off. Pizza parties were the name of the game. But after a year, though, fortunately, I guess, we sold the company. I left, and probably maybe 18 months later, I got a call from a former employee who said, guess what, Marcie? When you left and we were acquired, we all got huge raises. Good for you. That's fantastic. However, the culture had completely changed. No one cared what this person did. No one even asked for his opinion on anything, and he was leaving. I was then even more convinced about the importance of corporate culture. As StarTex Power grew, pizza, because it's inexpensive, became and remains today the food of choice for corporate lunches and late evening meals. We worked many hours of overtime. Donuts kept us going in the mornings, with cookies an afternoon staple. It's probably just a sugar high that keeps you going all day. Potluck meals were social events that every single person attended and brought something. We'd even have best dessert competitions. Departments were given $50 allowances to decorate for holidays. Competitions for dressing up for Halloween or Go Texan Day were pretty normal. And they really celebrated the competitive nature of the employees, with the winners getting a lunch and a plastic trophy. As a matter of fact, our first corporate holiday party was at our house. Nothing fancy, a few poker tables, beer, and wings. But it was a chance to get to know one another on a personal basis. But keeping employees well-nourished on pizza and donuts is only one way of feeding corporate culture. The second of the 5 components to a successful corporate culture is accessibility. Accessibility to us means being available for both our customers and our employees. For our customers, our executives have their names, email addresses, and phone numbers on the website, and we encourage customer feedback, positive or negative. Employees know that I'm copied on every single customer service email, all Public Utility Commission correspondence, and any information from the Better Business Bureau. You want to be hands-on and know what's going on your company? Just ask the ones who pay your bills, your customers. They will tell you. Accessibility to our employees means having a true open door policy. And I mean leaving my door open, my blinds open to see and be seen. It means spending time with the employees, getting to know them, and making them feel at ease so that they're comfortable talking with us about a personal issue or a business concern. The third component of a strong corporate culture is to enlist employee feedback. In other words, a willingness to learn from your employees. That often translates into streamlined processes, cost-cutting measures, and innovative ways of doing things. And I'm not referring to the typical suggestion box with the little slat that people put things in that nobody really ever reviews, or it's just often used as a vehicle for disgruntled employees. No, our ways are much different. Let me give you an example. Back in 2007, I knew StarTex Power was growing rapidly, and I really needed to be sure that our foundation was strong and something that we could build upon. Instead of sitting out around a room with senior management talking about ideas, I asked all employees to recommend any fixes, no matter how small or large they were. And we divided them into 3 buckets. The first was an idea that we really didn't feel was worth pursuing. The second was a short-term block and tackle. And the third was a project, a great idea, but would just take a little bit longer to implement. but every single idea was responded to with specifics on why it was classified in that bucket, and not just the typical, thanks for sending us your idea, we're not going to implement it at this time. The block and tackle list was then split up by senior executives so that each one had a sponsor. However, the initiator of the idea was the team captain and oversaw its implementation. Each week, I summarized by email what block and tackle issues had been resolved, the corporate impact the change had, and most importantly, whose idea it was. Let me give you a great example. When StarTex Power signs up a new customer, we send them a welcome package. It has all their contract information, their terms of service. It also has a form where they can complete to do an automatic debit or credit of their bill every month. And that form tells them who, what, when, where, how, and why, everything they wanted to know about automated debit and credit and the benefits. We asked them to fax it back to us. Nowhere on that form was the fax number. Nowhere. So, of course, what did that create? Increased call volume and customer hassles. Now, talk about an easy fix. I bet that didn't take an hour. Of course, we had to figure out the font and, all the little details, but it didn't take an hour to put that fax number on our form. Voila, immediately. Reduction in customer confusion and also a reduction in unnecessary call volume. The employee was recognized for the idea, and we improved our processes, but only because we were willing to listen to our employees. There is no way senior management would have known that that fax number was not on that form. Impossible. Through 2007 and 2008, we were growing quickly and had about 70 employees, so poker games at our house was really out, but we needed to continue to get to know our staff and encourage accessibility and free flow of information. It was time to think creatively. Hello. We had to be flexible. The fourth component of a strong corporate culture is flexibility. Over the years, I played little games with my employees. I'd hand them a Hershey's Kiss if I could recognize their name when they were away from their desk. Well, once we got to 70 people, that just wasn't possible. So what I do now is, on payday, every 2 weeks, I try and deliver all the check stubs. Yeah, it takes about 45 minutes, but it really gives me a chance to put a name with a face, say hello, and thank the employee for everything that they've done. Remember, as we go through these discussions, the 5 components don't just happen. Implementing a corporate culture requires constant effort. As an example, just last week, I noticed there were some beautiful flowers on an employee's desk that I knew was leaving to pursue a law degree. It would have been really easy for me just to go right past her desk. I was busy, like many of you are, with a to-do list this long, but I have to practice what I preach. So I stopped, thanked her for her contribution, and told her how much she'd be missed. Tears streamed down her eyes as she thanked me for caring. I also make myself go out one door of the office and come back in the other, thereby circling the office several times a day, or what I often call MBWA, management by walking around. A small change that makes a huge difference. Today, with 120 employees, maintaining corporate culture is even more difficult and requires more creativity and flexibility to keep it going. Remember my comments about an open door policy where we'd get constant feedback, positive or negative? Well, now we have to be flexible. Being as large as we are, we just don't get that kind of feedback. We have to solicit that information, and we'd have to do it in a deliberate way. Remember, corporate culture doesn't just happen. So we sent out a survey through survey.com very inexpensively, asking our employees to respond anonymously on 25 questions, ranging from accountability to clarity in job description to rewards and recognition. Some of the data was shocking. The company scored high on environment, job satisfaction, and teamwork. But when asked specifically about corporate culture, we got mixed reviews. Apparently, we missed the boat on codifying exactly what our corporate culture is and documenting it for all to see. As a result, we have recently finalized our mission statement, our vision, our corporate values, and we will be formally rolling them out over the next year. Each quarter, we plan to take a different value and explain how we incorporate that value into our day-to-day operations as a means of defining our corporate culture. We'll create a road to success. The survey also showed a weakness in how our employees felt they were being rewarded and recognition that they were getting. Considering this is where I felt we excelled, and also one that I have a very strong personal involvement in, I had to pick my jaw off the table. I was shocked. As you can see, we give balloons to customer service representatives when they score 100% on quality assurance, and we give them bigger balloons when they get 4 100s. We'd celebrate the naming of our corporate the naming of our corporate newsletter, or the individual who lost the most weight in our Biggest Loser campaign. And I know there appears to be a disconnect with all the cookies and donuts and the Biggest Loser campaign, but we got to do it all. We have employee appreciation weeks where we give employees massages and ice cream sundaes delivered by senior executives. We celebrate everything. So what was I missing? Turns out, after meeting with our employee council, a proud and prestigious group of our top performers that has provided to be invaluable. It was the real connection that wasn't going on. We were missing informal manager feedback, small educational forums, peer recognition. I still couldn't figure out why what had worked in the past wasn't working today. After a few days of searching, it became obvious. Our workforce was changing. As we grew, the growth came from primarily sales and customer service, where the average age is 25. Now, almost 45% of our staff are millennials or Generation Y, 35% are Generation X, and less than 20% are baby boomers or older. And when we started, we were almost 100% baby boomers. No wonder why all our efforts weren't being as appreciated as they had been in the past. We weren't the same company as in the past. And unfortunately, we can't, as a friend of mine suggested, just make them change. It doesn't work that way. So how do we translate and even pass on our definition of corporate culture to leaders of the future? Millennials, and as I can see, there are several of you in this audience, are much more confident working in teams. They love both teamwork and team competition. They want flexibility in their hours to balance their family, friends, and philanthropic activities. They want to know who, what, when, where, how, and why on everything. They seek leadership and structure, but they also expect to have their ideas respected. Boredom is an absolute killer for this group. Ideas our employee council had were brown bag lunches for learning purposes, participation as a company in events such as the Komen race, and continued competitions on everything from attendance to Halloween decorations to performance metrics. We're working with our managers to teach them how to provide more informal feedback and guidance to employees, just more daily interaction. Themes, and more themes will be incorporated into our day-to-day operations. But how fabulous, though. Our employees want to learn, and they want to be better. The first 4 components of a successful corporate culture: an all-for-one, hands-on-deck atmosphere, a willingness to learn from your employees, a flexibility to adapt to the needs of a growing and changing workforce, all culminate in the fifth component, respect. Respect for our customers. Our rapid growth is constantly pushing our capabilities to provide top-notch service. Answering phones on a timely basis is a challenge, and we're always trying to find out that perfect balance between number of customers and number of customer service agents. Everyone here knows how long hold times really produce angry customers who are more likely to shop around and switch. Many of our competitors have implemented an IVR, interactive voice response system. You know, the annoying answering machine that you have to press 1, then 2, then maybe 4, but you should have pressed 3, and no longer can you hit 0 and actually reach an operator. Well, I've been against using an IVR automated system because of the lack of personalized service it creates. But on the flip side, though, it clearly reduces call volumes. Can a company with a corporate culture that puts the customer first successfully implement an IVR to enhance service, not take away from it? After years of resisting the idea, we demonstrated our flexibility and willingness to rethink old values, and we implemented our own IVR system. To ensure that our customers remain top priority, we included sales, service, or anyone who wanted to participate in the implementation and design of our system. I'm proud to say that I think we've accomplished the perfect balance of technology and service. After pressing 1 for English or 2 for Spanish, the customer immediately has the option of speaking to a live service representative or utilizing our automated machine. On our first day, our IVR took 150 calls, or roughly 10% of our daily call volume, reducing our call hold time. Our employees, in a competition, of course, have named our new system Amber, Automated Machine-Based Electricity Representative. Mission accomplished. To further implement a culture more in tune with our millennials, we've also recently adopted an HISD elementary school, and employees can volunteer up to 30 minutes a week on a variety of activities. We focused our book and food drive on the school, and I think it's really given us all a perspective on the big picture of what's important. I know, implementing a corporate culture sounds like a give, 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 give. I can see it in your faces. But remember, a satisfied employee pays dividends in many ways over and above good customer service. StarTex Power has an employee attrition rate of just 2.5%, and our call center's attrition rate is just slightly above that at 2.8%, roughly 14% below the average call center rate. This is a huge differential and represents substantial savings on recruiting and training costs, not to mention the fact that a strong culture gets the best candidates. Our Best Place to Work awards, J.D. Power's recognition, articles in both Inc. magazine and the Houston Business Journal are all the results of a strong and deliberate corporate culture, and each of these is free advertising and third-party confirmation of our legitimacy. Absolutely priceless. As we create, implement, and continue to modify and adapt to our corporate culture, we have to think about the future. I've started studying companies such as Zappos that try to be employee-centric and hip and cater to millennials, to learn and replicate some of their ideas and their success stories, including paying a new employee several $1,000s to leave after the training program if they aren't happy. Those several $1,000s are far less than the cost of a disgruntled employee. I believe that corporate culture is the foundation to any successful company. It starts at the top, requires constant attention and evolution to implement. Without an environment based on respect, accessibility, flexibility, a willingness to learn from your employees, and an all-for-one, hands-on-deck approach, employees can't and won't succeed and neither will a business. I urge you, when you leave here today, take a look at the corporate culture of the business where you work. Whether you're the senior decision maker or a mid-level employee, you have a stake in the success of your company. If you're the decision maker, stop. Listen to your employees. Try some of the ideas I've mentioned. If you're an employee, make your voice heard. Offer suggestions for initiating or improving corporate culture. Whether it's pizza or balloons, team competition, or an employee council, the end result of a strong corporate culture will be improved productivity and a more enthusiastic workforce. Go ahead, give it a try, take a risk. Thank you. Did you guys, I don't know if we have time for questions or if you want to, or it's up to you? Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Either one of you two? What's the most important thing to any business? Customers. Customers. Without the customers, it doesn't matter because you'll have no cash flow. You'll have nothing. Yes, sir.
As you grew, how did you screen for the right talent to preserve the culture that you had established and also the culture?
Great question. One of the things that we did early on was, in order to save, we weren't going to hire a recruiter or pay staff recruiting companies. We do now a little bit, but we certainly couldn't back at the end. So we implemented a $500 reward to a person who brings in a new employee once they've been with the company for over 90 days. And what we really found is that employee understands the corporate culture and is more likely to refer someone that they know is going to be successful. So the majority of our employees came from employee references. Yes, sir.
Are there any special things you did in the interview process?
Okay, I'll repeat the question. The gentleman asked whether there were any specific questions that we asked during the interview process, I guess to kind of feel out if the person's going to fit in. Well, I'd love to tell you that we were that sophisticated. Honestly, my idea is and has been that we try and get as many of the frontline employees to meet with a potential candidate. And just to have one big group interview, and I'm not talking about for a CFO position, but I'm talking about for another customer service representative, and for the candidate to get a real feel for the type of people that they'd be working with. And I think that's the best way. Typically, you can tell if there's not a comfort. If the employee is too casual and the interviewee is not comfortable with that, you'll sense it. Any other questions? Yes, sir. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
See a lot of personal involvement by yourself in fostering the culture, but once your customer number reaches 1 million customers, how do you envision what you do?
That's a great question. It talks about my personal involvement with the company that's, I guess fairly easy at 125,000 customers, but what happens when we get to 1 million? That's a great question. I'm not sure. But I know that if I don't try and look into that and make plans today, it's not going to happen. But I believe there are ways to accomplish that by having customer forums, to having more interaction with the customers directly. But that's what I'm hoping to learn from my mentors who run larger corporations and seeing the successful, Southwest Airlines to me is probably one of the greatest examples of strong corporate culture. And I hope to use a lot of their success stories. Yes, sir.
If customers come to you through the power-to-choose.org website, what do you, where all the kilowatt hours are pretty close, what do you do to distinguish yourself there? What do you do to follow up?
The gentleman made a comment, and accurately, that a lot of our, or probably the majority of our residential customers come from the power-to-choose.org, which is a government website that has all the retail electric providers, and it's a standard. You have to list your kilowatts, kilowatt hours, And he asked how we distinguish ourselves at that point. We can't distinguish ourselves at that point. We're really not allowed to put any fluff, use different, font sizes or colors. But the customer usually either clicks through to our website or calls us. And when they call us, we better answer that phone. And a lot of times we have customers say, the reason we're going with you is because you're the first company that answered the phone on a timely basis as we went through the power to choose. I don't know if we have time for one more question. Yes, sir.
This isn't a question, it's a comment on the significance of your topic. My sister-in-law works for Anadarko Petroleum, and a few years ago, and that's, I guess, a medium-sized company. A few years ago, they were losing a lot of their employees. 45 people in her work group quit, and they started having meetings with employees and getting in big groups, like even in an auditorium, and getting feedback. And then they had executives interview each one of them, and from that, could they have mishandled or not handled. But after that, they brought in Jim Hackett from other companies where my wife had worked previously, and that place is a different organization, and they implemented all those things they found, and they let some people go, and it has made my sister-in-law is now manager where she wasn't before they promoted her because of her participation in that.
And she's probably very happy
And he is.
and works harder.
And working day and night and loving it.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.